Hello, I think. Welcome. Nope, not yet. Aha! They are receiving my content. Hello, fellow druids. Welcome back to my more regularly, hopefully, mildly shorter streams of stuff where I talk about Circle. And I have a lot more content to discuss now than I feel like I had leading up to this point. We were sort of on hold for a long time with Tharn. If you've seen some of my really long videos where I was live, where I talked at length about the changes that Tharn went throughout the CID, you know, you can see that there's a lot more content. This is sort of my summary, sort of, if you will, of where I think things ended up. Just sort of general thoughts. I'm aiming for this to be not a deep dive into like list composition ideas and things like that. I'm just sort of high level going through everything. Overall, I would say my feelings on how the CID went is overwhelmingly positive. This CID had the highest participation of any CID to date, and that includes Grimkin and Crucible Guard, which are full factions that went like twice as long. I think those were 5-week CIDs. This was basically 3, I think. Or 2. Actually, I think it was only 2. But there were 3 updates. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so overwhelmingly positive. I think most of the pieces were positive. The 3 warlocks that were included in the CID, I think all have some place in the faction again. I was actually just reading some folks debating like Morvana 1 versus Morvana 2. And obviously, just a caveat, anything I talk about here and anything that I'm going to be talking about for the next probably from now until the document drops and these rules are live in the game, is going to revolve around what's coming up. I'm personally hoping that it'll be available for Machine Weekend, but I think that is a little bit of a long shot. And is a little bit more wishful thinking than possibly doable. But anyways, from now until then, I will probably be talking about this stuff. But caveat is where the CID ended and where the CID took us is not necessarily where we are going to be when it goes live. And actually, just as an example of that, today on the dev hangout or whatever they call it, the video that Privateer Press does, Will Hungerford mentioned, for example, that he felt, or it seemed that there was a feeling that the Storm Raptor had one too many things going for its range game, that the range 14 inches, deceptively mobile, and or the -5 range to attacks that target it. One of those rules was probably a rule too far. And we don't know. Maybe they're testing. Just because he said that doesn't mean that they won't end up testing it and feel that that's still true. But I can sort of see what he's talking about there. And my personal preference, and not that this will matter at all, would just be to put the gun back to range 12 and keep deceptively mobile as well as flying high. But we'll see. We'll see what testing is. But I say that because the caveat here is just because I say that this is how it is and it has a synergy when things go live, these things can change because there's going to be internal testing. Pagani was out for much of this month. I don't know how back he is from his baby stuff. There was a con they went to in the middle of this, so I suspect there will be still some internal work on where they want this stuff to end up. So just a caveat, and I'll probably caveat that in my other videos where I talk about it too. So, but yeah, overwhelmingly, I feel like it was good. I feel like Iona, Morvana 1, Morvana 2 ended up in good places. I know there's some consternation amongst some players that Iona doesn't meet the definition of aggressive that the developers put out there. I partially don't care. I mean, if you're upset that you expected her to meet that qualification, she didn't, I'm sorry. I think, though, there is some attempt to keep, as far as Tharn characters that are warlocks, separate. And while Chromac 2 was not part of this CID, the idea that she would be, Chromac 2, but a lady, is not really what they were aiming for, I don't think so. But she seems really strong, and she definitely seems like somebody who there's still a lot of unlocking to do with her, and tactical depth with her, which is good. So they're good. Overall, I think the Tharn all ended up coming out positive. I still have a few minor concerns. I'm not sure that I totally feel like the Well of Orboros is exactly where it needs to be at the end of this CID. Structures are very difficult to balance, and it's bringing a free solo in, which is very difficult to balance. And I just have concerns that it's going to be like interesting and maybe good, but like the thing that just doesn't quite fit in lists. So we'll see where that goes. The Storm Raptor, like I said, we'll see where that ends up. There was a lot of people with a lot of different opinions on that. There was another one I was concerned with. The Theme Force benefit, I think, was a very positive change. One corpse for everything. It may actually prove to be too strong, so that's another thing that we should sort of be keeping an eye on watching as, between now and rules release. I think it does one thing that it intended, which was decrease the perception that Death Wolves were the only good unit to put corpses on. But it also does more heavily incentivize things like the male Tharn, and might just be too good because they all now have like a boost and stuff. So that part's really why I think that they could change. If there's any other change that happens with that benefit, I do think that there's going to be some focus where the Death Wolves are not going to just get the ability to get all those corpses. So I would go forth with that in mind. I don't think you will see a return to Death Wolves being able to be loaded up with 8 corpses like you used to. Again, just conjecture from me, but that would be my guess. So, I think that's good for the theme overall. I'm a little concerned with the Bloodweaver Haruspex. I think she's strong, but I do think that 50% of that unit is going to be a tough ask in some cases, but that's fine. And I think Wolf Riders are in a good place, but I also think that it's going to be... I think people are going to play less of them with the advantages they see in the other Tharn. Just sort of what it feels like is likely to be the case. But the Tharn Wolf Rider champion is very strong. I do think Wolf Riders with Morvana 2 are quite strong. We'll talk about that probably in another episode later on. Lord of the Feast, I'm really happy with where he ended up. I hope that those changes do stick, because Blood Reaper and Speed 6 kind of puts him in this... what I like about the theme change and his change is it puts him in a place where he's more self-reliant. If they brought infantry, he can use corpse generation and the infantry to load himself up and sort of scale into a late game threat. I really like that about what they did with him. It is negative for Bridget and Call. We'll talk about that later on too, but I think they'll be okay. Where things like Ravagers ended up were really strong, where the White Mane ended up was really strong. I'm personally a little disappointed in where the Shaman seems to have ended up. The fact that Hunter's Grace is a spell when so many other things are no sleeping on the job, and that this model's still 5 points, is a little unfortunate. I'd like to see either Hunter's Grace get a little bit of a buff, or it could go down to 4 points, or he could get no sleeping on the job and just remove Hunter's Grace, or Hunter's Grace could turn into just an ability, although I think functionally it would just be no sleeping on the job. I'm not sure, but just where he's at, and without Battle Wizard, like he's very uninteractive, and he's also not typically like a late game piece, where some other things in other CIDs were. So some mild concerns there, but I think he's still fine. I think you'll still play him in lists. He reminds me a lot of Amok in some ways in Blighted Ogryn lists, Primal Terrors lists, where as a solo he's pretty like on paper, but still has a place in most lists because of the utility he brings. Talked about Blood Weavers. I'm just sort of scrolling through. I'm really excited about where the Blood Shaman is. I think that piece is super compelling for any of these lists, and it's one of those pieces that finally like really gives me a very like circle feel, gives me a very strong feel. It's something you have to think about because she has 3 really strong abilities, but you can't use all of them. One of them requires an additional resource in models that are friendly faction, which is limiting. I think a few people are over-focusing on trying to put her into Call of the Wild style lists using the Well. I do not think that is worthwhile. We'll maybe touch on that later, but just as a note there. So the Blood Shaman is a really good place. I think the Blood Pack are one of the units that's going to surprise people coming out of this, just because I think the number of things that they are able to do and like rules they're able to ignore, and in Circle I think it's fine. Like if they were in any of the factions that have legitimate ranged buffs in their faction, they would just be probably busted, to be honest, with the rules they have. So I'm really happy with where they are in Circle. I think that they're fine with the rules they have. The POW 14 puts them in a category most ranged attacks don't get to. Range 12 is something unique to the theme forest that they do, and in fact, to a degree, to Circle in general. Ignoring forests and cover and concealment and whatnot is fine. If any of the rules I was going to remove, it would be Arcing Fire, to be totally honest. I think Hunter fits better than Arcing Fire does, and I think especially with Treewalker, so good rules. I think the beasts that came in to the CID were all also very good updates, and some that surprised me. I did not expect the Pureblood to be being tested at Rat 6. I did not expect +1 strength for the Stalker. I did not expect rapid healing for Getorix, and I think those are all very positive changes. Obviously, I did not see in testing that Getorix was really a problem, but I also didn't see anybody try like a Devourer's Host list with Baldur 2. Which is concerning. Loki being added to Devourer's Host, another very positive change. The 3 goats all feel to me like they're in a good place. I do think there's still going to be some sort of like, do you bring a Gnarlhorn, do you bring a Riphorn? But hopefully they each have lists where they make sense. Like the Riphorn's actually a lot tankier, for example. Talked about Lord of the Feast, talked about Iona. Talked about goats. I might be mostly through everything. Deathwolves gained AD. That was sort of a weird buff that I didn't think was necessary. Brenos changes. Brenos picked up Battle Wizard at the end. I think this is cool. I would really have liked to see him be able to cast more spells rather than do melee, but I can also see why that feels too strong. I would have been plenty happy to see him move up in cost if he also moved up in like what he was doing, but since he's aimed to be a little bit more utility, I think in the way they see him, I don't, that also makes Mulg can be 22 points or whatever it is they left him, they ended up going to, partially because Mulg also hits like Mulg, whereas Brenos does not hit like Mulg. He hits like an old man goat by comparison, which is fine. I mean, he's still, his bonking stick is still power strength 16, but Mulg's bonking stick is POW 19. That's a pretty considerable difference in this game, and that's before buffs and stuff. So the particular thing is, I think that he's going to be really good, especially with Morvana 1. Who does have spells she wants to get out there, especially with if Mortality does stick, which I really, really hope it does. I think it's really fitting. I think she's in a really good place with that. And Battle Wizard was a nice tweak. His other spells definitely have uses. His magic attack is really strong, and Arcane Protections is one of those animi that are actually a much bigger deal than a lot of people are making it out to be. Once you put your caster casting this Animus functionally means they are that if you're going to cast spells at them, they're coming forward. And that also means you can put Brennos sometimes in some interesting places with the terrain, I would say. And again, it means if you want to cast spells, you're not, these casters that like to hang back and use arc nodes like Ron or Haley 2 or sometimes Haley 3, Rasheth. There's casters you wouldn't expect, right? Veil 2, Veil 1, all of Crix, basically. Some of Crucible Guard, actually, and even Convergence to a minor degree, right? Like, if most spells are range 8 or range 10, so, and the only exception that I can think of that is Arcane Bolt that's on like Haley, and Dogpile, which is only on circle casters. So if they want to throw things like your caster's immune to telekinesis, your caster, like, there's just tons and tons of stuff this makes you immune to, and so combining that with some of the other benefits that you get is actually a pretty strong benefit that you wouldn't really take into consideration. So I really like where Brennos is ending up. If there are any little tweaks here, great, but yeah, really strong addition. And the Blood Reaver Knight, which actually is going to be like low-key one of the best updates they made, just because of her ability to dispel. Yeah, so like, I don't have a ton to say on that. I think her being a Powhatan Weapon Master rather than the weird, like, there was some cool thematicism to her being able to like boost the hit with her life and then kill a living model, or boost the hit or damage depending on what you needed to do, and then kill that model and then heal the D3 back. But of course that would usually end at some point when you did 3 damage to yourself and only healed 1, and then you're doing them, or like that happened twice or something, and you're doing the math and you're like, oh well, I have 2 life left, guess I'm not boosting and hoping that I kill this. And like, it sort of would be fun sometimes to see how that went, but it wasn't very consistent. And I really, really like where this puts this model. And Powhatan Weapon Master means she's just never really a slouch. So if you're in those matchups where there isn't really a lot of models for her to like eat through, that's going to be really strong. So, but in general, we will. I'm actually planning to do more recording tonight, and see kind of what. We're going to talk about more things. There's going to be more things as the weeks go on that we talk about. Some will be lists, some will be just analyzing certain pieces or looking at things that people may not be looking at. Possibly soliciting, if people are playtesting stuff. I would love to hear what you're testing, especially if it was stuff that was not obvious from the CID, either for myself to test, or we can talk about it on here. Or just, I like analyzing these things too, because what you're testing in one regard might end up being something that kicks off another thought for me or for somebody else. So, yeah. But anyways, the TLDR of this entire video is that the CID was good. I do hope that they work on a few things while they have it in-house, and, obviously acknowledging that there might be a few things that they feel were a little too aggressive. Most of the time, I would say most things come back in the update looking roughly like they looked in the last week of CID, but not always. Sometimes there's some ghost buffs, actually. Sometimes there's some additional, there are some things nerfed, and I shouldn't say nerfed, rather not coming out as strong as they were in the last week or whatever. So in any case, as always, thanks for listening. The link to the Discord and the Facebook group are still down there. Still love to hear the conversation there. I am on the regular War Machine Discord from time to time. I'm on Twitter. So anywhere you want to start the conversation up, I would love to hear about it. And look forward to more specific CID, Tharn, and Circle discussions to be happening in the near future. Bye.